Hello, my name is Cassie Jones, amateur author and self-professed villain lover. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the importance of a well-developed, well-written villain, as well as a couple tips on how to write them from my own past experiences. I've often felt that people seem to struggle when it comes to writing villains because the characters feel completely different compared to how one would write their hero. But when you boil them down, villains are just characters who need a little love. Why does it matter? Well, in most cases, villains drive the plot, especially if they are the reason the conflict has arisen. If your villain is flat, you run the risk of undermining your plot. It's best to develop a strong conflict leader. In addition, villains can help your hero develop, especially if your villain is connected to the hero through their backstories. Developing this link can help your characters grow as the story unfolds. They might even learn something. Lastly, as a villain lover myself, I figured I'd mention this. Not everyone likes heroes. Some people just want to watch the world burn. I'm joking, of course, but this is something you may want to keep in mind when writing your villain. Now let's move on and talk about some famous villains from pop culture to get an idea of how well-developed villains can leave a lasting impact on the audience. They may not be everybody's favorites, but they're certainly memorable. Let's start with the classic, Darth Vader, the guy who makes villainy look fun and easy. Darth is memorable for his striking design and compelling character arc that is stuck in people's minds for generations thanks to the tragic figure underneath the imposing helmet. Up next is Loki. Marvel was notorious for weak one-dimensional villains until Loki came along. In addition to being drop-dead gorgeous, Loki was loved for his relatable personality and well-fleshed-out backstory. His character even seemed to develop over time. Javert may not be as well known, but his motivations and social status as a man of the law were striking and often left audiences wondering if he truly was the bad guy. If you asked him, he'd simply say he was doing his job. So why are these characters memorable? Their designs fit their personalities and are eye-catching. Their personalities are well developed and rather deep, and each of them connect to their hero, often acting as their hero's foil. Now let's move on and talk about how we can design our own well-developed villains. But first, let's talk about archetypes. Archetypes are a typical example of a certain person or thing. I often use archetypes as a base when making new characters. Let's start with my favorite, the morally gray villain. This is a style I've mostly seen in anime. While they vary in personality, grays are typically motivated by their own interests rather than strong morals, and often jump between good and evil as they please. Grays don't work for every story, but in my experience, I found they work well in character-driven stories with strong personalities. Grays also make for fun antiheroes, especially when given soft spots, like a love interest, or even budding feelings for the hero. Now on to a more common villain type, the anti-villain. Anti-villains are known for being deeply depressing, for having deeply depressing backstories to help build a connection to the audience. These characters can be extremely compelling and may even run the risk of stealing the show, but there's a catch. Anti-villains require well-developed personalities to try and show the audience they matter. This takes a lot of time and planning. It's best to take things slowly, allowing the character to develop over time. Ah, the prince of antiheroes. No matter how old I get, antiheroes will always be amazing to me. These types of villains are super common in anime and work great as foils and secondary villains. I often write antiheroes as villains who start out as jerks and slowly soften them over time. It takes a lot of development and growth, but the results are far too rewarding to pass up. Antiheroes are truly my favorite for that reason. As a side note, attractiveness can be extremely compelling. It may seem shallow, but as humans, we are naturally inclined to trust a pretty face. Villains will use anything to their advantage, including their looks. All in all, villains are just like any other character. Put yourself in their shoes and develop them with a distinct personality and backstory to help them shine. Your villain lovers will thank you for your hard work. And with that, we have come to the end of our presentation. But before you go, I'd like to leave you with these final tips. Always keep the plot in mind. Does your villain fit the plot? If not, what needs to change? Thank you.